right. Well, I'm just going to get started, and then once people join, we'll be good to go. Hey, folks, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Chris, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. Today's event is being recorded, and you'll receive an email link later today with the recording in case you miss any part of today's event. With this webinar, too, we've got plenty of time for Q&A, so be sure to post your questions in the chat or the questions widget. Note that for folks watching on YouTube, which is our first time doing it too, by the way, there's probably going to be a few seconds delay. It shouldn't be too bad. So be sure to join us on Zoom if you want to ask your questions live. I'll also be looking at the YouTube chat as well, so don't feel like you have to. Today's event is really exciting. It's called Why You Can't Trust Your Any Security Tool, coming from Defect Dojo. And I've got my superstar, ace solutions architect, Tracy Walker here, to talk about that, and also some really exciting stuff that we've got cooking up for both the Pro and Community Edition of Defect Dojo. So with that, I'll pass it over to Tracy. Kick it away.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, everybody. All right. We're going to have a brief webinar today. I think this whole thing probably within 30 minutes or so if you're trying to time things. Why can't we trust any security tool? So we're going to cover a couple of different topics today. Security layers, security vendors. So going to try not to go into a rant here, but there's a reason why I asked, can I do a webinar on this? Here we are. And then I'm going to highlight some recent updates for Defect Dojo Pro, specifically our MCP server. We have some new resources to help with OWASP, the latest top 10, as well as their Agentic AI top 10, which was released in January, I believe. And then also the EU CRA, kind of like a ability to run a report and kind of give you a gap analysis of where you may be with that. And then a special treat, the new Defect Dojo P-Cert advisory engine. What? Yeah, we'll do a real quick, very teaser preview of what this is and kind of what's coming in future months. So let's get started. All right. I may say some things here that might sound like I'm mansplaining some things, security splaining things to a lot of people who are very familiar with security. I'm also anticipating that there may be some security vendors watching or listening to this because this might get a little of attention as I continue my rant. Um, I've worked 20 years in internal IT, consulting, operations, software development. My entire career has been in internal IT, and a lot of it has also dealt with security, high security environments, in a lot of different places. And I've even sold security products where we were selling a scanner in the past. And I've seen a lot of bake-offs. I've done my own bake-offs between different scanners and which ones are more accurate and which ones are faster, and have all these criteria. The number one thing that I have learned is that no two scanners are alike. The majority of the time, you do not get the same results from two different scanners. You get a majority of the same thing, and then there's always this, single digit percentage fringe findings where this found some things that this one didn't, and those kind of things. Um, so yeah, if no two scanners produce the same results, and you always have some differences between those scanners. Scanners can scan things in a lot of different ways, the way that they identify versions of files, whether they're actually looking at the internals of a file or a binary versus just looking at the stamp that says what version it is and things like that. There's a lot of different approaches to the way a scanner can try to identify if your stack has a vulnerability. So this shouldn't be new information, but for some, I think it maybe is. And then this is my quote, because I've even heard somebody say, "No, this environment is secure," and that is your first red flag that you don't understand that no environment is 100% secure. In fact, this is why we do security in depth. No security layer is impenetrable. Every layer has a weakness. That's why we use layers. That's, why layers. Um, and this can be scanners. You can just have different scanners that are doing different things. And sometimes you want to have different scanners scanning the same security layer. We work with a customer that has a very high security environment, and they run 5 scanners on every single container, and then they compare and contrast those results because it is that important to make sure that they are getting comprehensive. And if one scanner can find something that the others don't, they need that information. And it also builds that confidence when, yes, 90% of, or 95 or 98% of the findings are showing up the same, then it also increases your confidence. Yeah, and this is the other principle, and this goes back to, this is a secure environment. You should always be assuming that you're already compromised. Security, kind of the grind of security is you're constantly trying to prove you're not, right? You're trying to prove the thing that you have to assume that you are compromised, and you're constantly trying to prove, no, our network packets don't include anything else in these layers. Nothing else is encrypted that shouldn't be, and just all the little checks that you have to do and all the details. So again, this it all just comes and boils down to you cannot trust any single security layer. You cannot trust any security scanner or tool. You want to use layers and you want to do as much cross-checking and layering as you can. Now that all sounds really good. But the reality is, budgets, time, all the overhead, even adding a second scanner is like, oh my gosh, now I got to go change all these pipelines or whatever it is, right? There's a lot of overhead to that. And if you're not using a tool like Defect Dojo that does aggregate and make that easier, you're doing all of this by hand too. So it really is, it penalizes you from a work standpoint and an effort standpoint if you're having to do this. And if you're trying to use AI tools to do this, they're still trying to do the same things that Defect Dojo does of normalizing that data, deduplicating that data, transforming that data. Sometimes no two scanners have the same format. We're going to get more into that as well. Now, there may be vendors out there going, oh, of course, Tracy, you're arguing that all the vendors should just be working together because that's what you guys do. You guys don't exist unless you're importing our data from our scanners. Well, yeah, you're right. We have this unofficial vision statement, if you will, that at Defect Dojo that we help every environment improve security, right? Whether it's through the open source or whether it's through the paid pro version, any environment can benefit from additional vulnerability, universal vulnerability management, normalization, deduplication, all the things that we do. Um, so, and yeah, you guys don't sell a scanner because these other vendors, they have a scanner and they're telling us it's the best scanner. I can tell you that I've really annoyed some salespeople in the past when I would tell, I've had a situation where a salesperson said, "Oh, our scanner is the most trustworthy. You can trust our scanner." And that immediately I knew undervalued or undermined our credibility because in security, you cannot trust any scanner. What you should be saying is to any prospect is, well, we have a great scanner and it's very accurate and it catches as many things as we can possibly put into that scanner. But as you know, you cannot trust any scanner. So you should be using multiple scanners, but you should definitely be including ours in that pack, right? That's really the message that you should be hearing from vendors, that they understand security principles, that they're putting your security first and not their own, aspirations. So why am I ranting? Why is this coming up? Why did I ask, can I do a webinar on this? Well, because I was working on a parser. Defect Dojo supports parsers for the community version as well as the pro version. The parsers give us the ability to, in great detail, import data, normalize that data, transform that data in many cases. Sometimes we have to break fields apart so that you can use the data elements separately. Sometimes we need to combine data elements. Every single scanning tool produces different formats, different strings, all of that kind of thing. And so I was building a parser for one of those scanners, and I was having a real issue trying to get it to work. It would import, but then I was missing fields, and then I was trying to figure out, well, why am I missing these fields? And then I was getting column errors that it couldn't parse the CSV. So I tried to open it in Excel, and Excel couldn't open it. So then I'm thinking, well, maybe there's something wrong with the file. There's, because if Excel can't open this, and maybe the Python CSV parser, which has been around for how many years? So what am I, so it's got to be a problem with the file. Maybe the prospect who had provided the file, when they edited or cleaned it up or whatever obfuscated details, maybe it was in the file. So they sent me another one, and I had the exact same problem. So it wasn't me, it was the file. It was the way that the file was being prepared. And in typical CSV, usually this is it. This is the actual code that you need to parse those. It's been around forever. It's like 3, 4 lines. Um, that was not the case with this one. This one had several deviations. I won't go into all of the technical details here, but the result to get it to work and to be able to parse it was over 150 lines of code to get this to work. And and with null fields and when some of the delimiters aren't there versus when they are. And what I came to realize, because this was not part of the standard format, is this feels intentional. This felt like this company intentionally was saying, well, we support CSV output, but good luck if you try to use it, right? They support it, they export it, but if you tried to import it somewhere else or open it in a spreadsheet and you can't, why would you do that? I personally, and this is just my personal opinion, but I can't think of another reason why you would do it unless it was not intentional. Um, we have, and I have heard by my own ears, uh, a vendor say, well, we work with a lot of vendors. In fact, a lot of vendors even come to Defect Dojo saying, our customers are saying they want to integrate so they can compare our results with other tools, and they get it. They're in security. Some of these vendors know that. We have some other vendors who do not. And when I heard this, the very first thing I thought was, you do not understand what you're talking about. That's not your data. That's your user's data. That's your user's security data. And they're trying to make that data better. They're trying to compare with other tools to know that they can have some confidence, because they're never going to trust you, but they at least have some confidence that they're getting some accuracy. Um, Defect Dojo is trying to improve security by giving companies that capability. When a vendor prioritizes things that don't serve you or your security, um, just things like standard vol IDs or participating in open standards, using standardized formats, not trying to tweak things to make it challenging. Um, that's, lock-in is something that a lot of vendors try to do and intend to do because, again, they want their logo in the middle, and you can't just pull this out because it pulls everything with it, the old Oracle database approach. That's not healthy for you. That's not a good thing. So if you're only using one scanner, let me just say, try to add another one. Try to add another level of security, another layer of security. Do some comparisons. There's a lot of open source scanners out there you can use. And if it becomes a little bit of an overhead, then sure, you've got open source Defect Dojo. If you want us to help it, of course, there's the pro version. If the vendor you're working with treats integrations as a threat, or they seem to drag their feet, or they promise they're going to do it, but they don't, I think you should look for another vendor. Straight up. Vulnerability scanner vendor lock-in. Yeah, if you're going to use, or if you feel like you're locked in and you can't possibly exfiltrate yourself out of that, you can also use open source Defect Dojo to help break that vendor lock-in, because it will give you the ability to see, I think of it as, all of a sudden my scanners just become different sensors, right? I'm going to aggregate all of that data. I can deduplicate between tools if you're in the pro version. And that gives me ability to use more scanners, but I see it as if it were just one super scanner that is trying different approaches and things like that. So that's the big takeaway. That's what I was like. I got to do a little webinar on this and do a little pitch on this. Any questions or comments, Chris? We will move on, but that's the pitch. You cannot trust any scanner. You should be using multiple scanners. It's not a pitch necessarily to use Defect Dojo. It's a pitch to improve your security and understand which vendors have your best interests at heart. All right, let's talk about some new features. So this is in the Pro MCP server. So again, MCP, if you're if you're late to the game, is a way to abstract APIs for a AI LLM, a large language model. We did a webinar on this last fall talking about our MCP server. Well, so MCP has things like resources. So it's a way to define something that you want the LLM to use to, like, say, do a cross-reference, say, like an OWASP top 10. So maybe I want to create a report based off of the OWASP top 10 that maybe does a mapping. This is part of the prompt that I'm giving it. Little tips and tricks. I don't really write my own prompts anymore. I use Claude a lot, but you can use any LLM. Ask the LLM to write your prompt. Tell the LLM what you need and some of the detail that you need, and then have it write an even more detailed prompt that can write this. This is not the entire prompt that I use to create an OWASP top 10 report from the recently released OWASP community, but this is kind of the one that I used. And Claude is down at this very moment because, of course, I'm doing a demo. So I have a backup. So this is the OWASP top 10 alignment report that it produced from that prompt. Uh, this is against a demo environment with really terrible data. Uh, and so it basically tells me my data is bad. It tells me I'm missing a lot of CWEs and out of active findings and all this. But it does give me a way to show, like, this coverage heat map of different OWASP categories and things that maybe I've got some gaps. I've got a lot of gaps with the CWE 0 because it's not very great demo data. But that's also what it told me. It immediately kind of points me to, hey, if you had this, I could do an even better report for you. So an example of using the OWASP Top 10 resource. Then I did another OWASP, an additional resource we've added is the Agentic AI applications top 10 that just was released, I believe, in January by OWASP. And again, this is a small portion, or this is the kind of the main portion of the data collection steps. I also have prompts in there for what I want the report to look like. I add the Defect Dojo logo, which now is recently supported, because you couldn't just say and add this logo to it, but now you can. So here is a AI generated report. Each one of these reports took about 10 to 15 minutes, because it's churning through a ton of data. In fact, a couple of them even required me to, like, continue the conversation within it. So agentic AI applications, top 10, total findings, products, etc. Terrible, terrible demo data, but we'll fix that in the future. Readiness scorecard. So a lot of things. So if you're, starting, you've got teams that are starting to use these AI tools, this might give you an easy way to kind of create a report to say, hey, where's our security at around agentic AI? And then the third is for our friends in the EU. Um, EU Cyber Resilience Act. So this will help you create a readiness report. Really interesting thing about when you're tracking vulnerabilities. Remediation of vulnerabilities flows through usually the same software development lifecycle as your feature requests and your new enhancements. You got to have people who are writing code, building code, changing code, etc. So you actually get a lot of visibility of your SDLC just from what you're seeing from defect remediation. Goes through the same pathways, right? So this EU Cyber Resilience Act, fairly lengthy prompt there, and we can provide these in the future if you're really interested. And we may even add them to the Defect Dojo MCP page because we do have some example prompts there. Um, Nonetheless, let's take a look at the EU Cyber Resilience Act Compliance Readiness Assessment. I'm partially ready. And so you can see you got some finding age, some of the things that the CRA is looking for as far as priority actions, your KEV ransomware findings, the things that CRA is looking for. So it gives you a scorecard, all the requirements of it, which things you're compliant, non-compliant, things that were not accessed, things that are. Um, and yeah, kind of gives you a way to map out, well, what do we need to do? What's our priorities, so that you're ready to be, compliant with the CRA. All right. And now with 9 minutes to spare, I think I can fit this in. Something new. So this is a little sneak peek. Nothing you see here is not in beta. I mean, everything you see here is in beta. So everything here could change, but this is the new product security incident response team advisory engine. If you're not familiar with PSERT, as it's known, PSERT is essentially um, it's all the advisories that you don't see necessarily from scanners, right? You're used to seeing CVEs or EUVDs from CISA and NIST, right? We're really familiar with those type of vulnerability advisories, right? But there's a lot of other advisories that come from, OS providers or database providers or just product, network devices, all these different manufacturers. And they have their own feeds of things that they have found. Sometimes those things refer back to CVEs and things like that. But for the most part, these may come in through RSS feeds. They also may come through, they may, the websites that house this information can also be like they'll have like a base kind of high level description of what the issue is, but then there's another page that has all of the details, right? So it can even be difficult to even kind of bring that stuff in and then try to figure out what's in your environment that's affected. And then how do I communicate to the people who need to fix that thing, right? It's like I need a scanner that can do all of these things without scanning the actual artifacts. I need a way to identify what a group in my company may have maybe using on their Windows machines or whatnot, and be able to identify advisories that might apply to them, even if I can't run a scan on their local environment. And that is really the challenge that we're trying to solve with the PSERT advisory engine. We want to be able to ingest from lots of different sources, like all these RSS feeds, match both against things that I know I have, so possibly against an SBOM. The majority of the time, I'm not going to have an SBOM for a lot of the things that I'm trying to secure and make sure that we're not vulnerable against. So it needs to work both with SBOMs or environments where I don't have an SBOM and I just need to represent these kind of assets and then prioritize them so that I can figure out how to group them, publish them to the right places, and then track the SLAs on are we remediating these things or making sure that we're not going to be impacted by them. So that's quite a bit. And that's what we're building. These are the current feed sources that we have. I do expect we're going to add a number to this. A lot of, again, these, like you see down here, RSS enhancers. So again, where you have a single page that has like kind of a summary, and then you got to click on each one to get to the details. So that's what these enhancers do, is they go grab that extra data and detail. And then the feed matching rules and matching those to the asset matching rules, regardless if that asset has an SBOM or not, so that I can say, I think I need to let some people know about this thing, and then be able to send it to them and export it into Defect Dojo Pro. So then you can track the remediation of it, just like you're tracking remediation for anything else like a normal scanner might provide. So what does that look like? Well, again, this is all going to be a little bit beta, but you're seeing a real live, I'm running this locally. You can see we've got all these feed sources. I can go to these feed sources and see detail if I need to. But really, the feed sources come in, we do the asset matching, so I can have ways of matching, keywords, regex, that I can, impact that asset by adding points or starring it. Feed filters do kind of the same thing on the feed side. I want to be able to star things. I want to be able to raise the points or, tag things, elevate the visibility because I've got thousands of these things. I need to sift out all that noise, right? Once we have those feeds coming in, so like you can see here, we've got lots of different feeds that come in from various sources. Once I have those feeds in, I can begin to sort. I can begin to see how many matches I have for various products. I can confirm false positive those matches so that maybe I can also ignore those things. And then I can add these things to a case. So a case would be something where I start to organize these things into different groups that things like maybe CVEs and wants, immutable. I may be sorting these things by components or group. There's all different ways I may want to organize these things. When I organize those findings, then I can add those to an advisory. And then that advisory is what I'm going to send to the various groups within my organization. I can have this approval status, or once I publish it, the advisory gets locked. So we can have the advisories that include all this information. And then once I publish it to Defect Dojo, you can see right here that PCERT advisory comes in. You can see I've got a couple of different tests here, and those tests, these alerts, or that the test is essentially like the case, and then the findings, the feed items, those turn into findings in Defect Dojo. So then this goes to that group, or the group can then use Defect Dojo to track these. You get things like the mitigation policy, references, all the detail is all in there. So you can just immediately get everything you need to make sure that you're not vulnerable with that particular issue. So that's what's coming with PCERT. And that's a really quick, fast beta demo. Questions, comments, concerns?
Nice. Awesome. Nice, Tracy. And I think the P-Search stuff is really exciting. I think that's definitely come up from some of our like users too. So I think that's really exciting to see it's there. I think one of the DMs I got was, when is it coming out? Don't think we can say a date yet, but I would say check your calendars next week, I think is the plan. So
No.
no. So
It's not
stay
coming
tuned,
out
basically.
next week. We are about to enter like a beta testing field. We do have expert we have customers who have asked us to help with this and are helping and drive the functionality and the workflow, and who are suffering literally, or suffering because they've got screens with power, Excel spreadsheets that and their own database, and folks that are trying to do this on their own. So we're going into beta with, it's a closed beta. It's not going to be available publicly yet. And then based on how that goes within the next, let's just say 6 to 8 weeks, but coming very, very soon.
Nice. And I think when that is live, not the private beta, but the public one, be sure to join our Slack community. So I'll post a link here. If you haven't already been a part of it, like we're releasing feature releases and like notes there. So in case you want to see what the latest update patch notes are, definitely be part of the community. You'll see the Slack channel there to join it. And if you have questions too about just the project in general, any like tech tips, all that kind of fun stuff, we've got a channel dedicated for that as well. I'm double checking YouTube. I don't see too much. Any questions there? Let me see.
Oh yeah, it's delayed.
A little bit delayed, so that's always kind of the fun bit there. And it's too bad we can't show like Claude prompts because as the demo gods ordained, Claude went down this morning because of a status update. So that's cool. It's that's always kind of fun.
It worked in our
Um,
walkthrough.
it worked for walkthrough. It worked for a second there, so maybe we should just screenshot it then, honestly. The next time maybe though. Let's see. Nothing too crazy yet. Um, Nothing too crazy. I'm not seeing any questions in the audience for us folks. So if folks have questions, feel free to chime in. We'll stay around for like a few more minutes just to answer anything that comes in the last second. I guess Tracy, like let's talk about like just the overall like idea and the philosophy for like Defect Dojo, especially for what security tools to use. I think definitely we've talked to a lot of folks just out in the community and just in general, like, well, I've got these set tools that I always am going to use, and like I don't really want to expand the number of tools I have in general and manage that. I guess like we get running that conversation a lot, but I guess like when you talk to like folks like that, what is the sort of the defect dojo philosophy kind of spin you kind of like tell them like, hey, you can't just run off just a set number of tools ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, it's, much like I was saying earlier, depending on the maturity of your security environment, you're always kind of looking like, where can I get information, run a scan, pen test, there's building blocks of what you can do. Uh, Very difficult to try to do it all at once right from the beginning. So it's always kind of a building process. But most environments will hit a peak where you've kind of got enough tools, well, not so much enough tools to review everything, but you're being overwhelmed with the amount of data that's coming at you, right? And which a lot of times you're also getting a ton of noise and false positives and things like that. Um, and so that's really where I think that, a tool like Defect Dojo that can help aggregate, normalize, transform, and really start to treat your scanners more like sensors, right? So, the hardest part is getting the first pipeline to run the scan and push the results into Defect Dojo. But then adding a second or third or fourth scan becomes a little bit more trivial because your overall workflow is exactly the same. You're just going to add a few more scans. You could even run them in parallel, so that it's not sequentially slowing down your builds or things like that. You can even run them as an offshoot. Don't slow the build at all. Spin up a different container within that workflow to run a bunch of scans and report all of that back to Defect Dojo, and let Dojo do the deduplication and normalization and the automated triage. So there's a lot that Dojo can do for you to free yourself up to add additional tools and to do things like PSERT, right? That's a great example of, this is not even going to have a scanner. It's just going to be a way to try to match things you're seeing in RSS feeds and from different vendors, and then track those things in Defect Dojo. We've seen people track a lot of different things in Defect Dojo. A finding in Dojo only requires a title, description, and severity. So anything that has a title and a description and severity, me taking out the garbage for my wife, that is a severity 5, right? I have to get that done. She wants to see that remediated right away, right? I could track that in Defect Dojo, or I could just go do it. But you get what I'm saying. You can track pretty much anything and use it in that way. And that's the other thing that's really nice about it, is you can use it in a lot of different ways. We see a lot of users using it in really interesting, innovative ways, and taking advantage of the deduplication and the normalization and aggregation, etc. It's what
Nice.
makes our MCP server so powerful. Instead of asking Claude or Copilot to normalize this stuff and then give me a report, it's just getting pure data. And we've already done all of that extra work that you would be spending a lot of tokens and context window to try to do.
Yeah, exactly. And if you haven't already, definitely check out our MCP integration for Defect Dojo. It's pretty awesome. Tracy's the rock star that powers a lot of it and helps like sort of push a lot of stuff out. So really exciting stuff on that front. I don't see any other questions from folks, so we can slowly start to wrap up. Knowing how this goes, maybe a question will come in at the very last second. But again, thanks everyone for joining for today. We'll send the recording link out probably later today, so keep an eye on your email. I did include the link as well to our webinar next week, where we talk a little more about GRC and the CRA, all that kind of fun stuff. So that's going to be a good fireside chat. If you want to join in, chime, if you like to see what's going on, definitely join us there. And with that, again, thanks everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody.